I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped inside my son's house. There was no sound, no newborn cry, no soft cooing, no tiny breaths drifting through the air like a promise of new life. But it was the silence inside the nursery that broke me. The crib was empty. The mobile above it wasn't spinning. The changing table had no diapers stacked in neat rows. Even the rocking chair was untouched, as if no mother had ever sat there holding her child. I stood in the doorway, gripping the frame to steady myself. "Adrian," I whispered, "where is she?" My son wouldn't look at me. His shoulders stiffened, his fingers twitching like he was fighting the truth in his own hands. Melissa stood behind him in a crisp white blouse, hair perfect, face expressionless. She looked like she had stepped out of a lifestyle magazine, not like someone who had given birth 5 days ago. She folded her arms. "We made the responsible choice, Evelyn." I looked between them. "Where is my granddaughter?" Adrian finally lifted his eyes. They were rimmed red, but not from sleepless nights with a newborn. More like guilt or fear or something I couldn't name yet. "Mom," he said quietly, "we already gave her up." Those words pierced me. Not like a knife, but like something dull and heavy pressed straight into the center of my chest. "You gave her up," I repeated. "Where is she?" Melissa raised a manicured hand. "She's deaf, Evelyn. The hospital did the screening before discharge. She failed. Twice." I stared at her, waiting for the part where she cried or apologized or admitted she panicked. Anything to prove she was human. Instead, she shrugged. "We can't raise a broken child." My vision blurred. I felt the ground slip in and out of focus. "A broken child," I said slowly, "is still a child." Melissa didn't flinch. Not in my family. Not with my parents watching. Not with the expectations we live under. The agency already placed her on the list for special cases. They'll find some charitable couple who wants a project. I stepped closer. "What agency?" No, Adrian snapped suddenly. He stepped between us. "You can't interfere. We talked to lawyers. Grandparents have no legal standing. The records are sealed." I froze. They had prepared for this, anticipated my reaction, and shut every door before I even arrived. "You knew I was flying across the ocean," I said. "You let me come all this way believing I would meet her." Adrian swallowed. "We didn't want to upset you before your conference. And we thought maybe you'd accept it. You only visit once a year anyway," Melissa added. "And there's nothing you can change." A trembling anger rose inside me. Not loud anger, not the shouting kind. This was quieter, sharper, the kind of anger that came from losing something you didn't even have the chance to hold. "You should leave," Evelyn Melissa said. "Go back to London. There's nothing for you here." I took one last look at the empty crib. Then I turned around and walked out the front door without another word. The moment I reached the driveway, my knees buckled. I sat on the cold concrete and felt the chill sink through my clothes. I opened the small gift bag I had brought, a silver rattle wrapped in tissue paper, a soft blanket embroidered with her initials, a stuffed lamb with a tiny stitched smile. I pressed the lamb to my chest. It was still warm from being in the car. Warm even though the child it was meant for had been thrown away. I wiped my face, stood up, and walked to my rental car. My hands shook so badly I could barely fit the key into the ignition. I didn't drive far, just until I found a Marriott off the highway. I checked in without remembering what I said to the receptionist. My room had beige walls and the faint smell of disinfectant. I sat on the bed in my coat and stared at the carpet until the pattern blurred. Then I lay down and cried. Not loud, not dramatic, just deep, aching sobs that made my ribs throb. Somewhere in Connecticut, my granddaughter was lying in a crib or a cot or a bed she didn't recognize. A stranger might hold her, or no one might hold her at all. No one who knew she liked warm light or soft singing. No one who cared what color blanket she preferred. No one who saw her as anything other than a checkbox on a form marked special needs. I covered my eyes with my forearm. The room felt too quiet, too big, too empty. Then a thought crystallized sharp and clear. I may not have legal rights, but I have time, and I have money, and I will not let her disappear. I sat up. The room stopped spinning, and my mind snapped into focus the way it always did at the start of an impossible audit case. I pulled out my laptop. I typed Private Investigators, Connecticut. I typed Deaf Community Resources. I typed American Sign Language classes near me. Then I whispered into the quiet room, "I'm not losing you, not without a fight." The next morning, I found a month-to-month rental on Riverside Avenue, a small apartment with a creaky floor and windows that rattled when trucks passed. It didn't matter. It had a long, empty wall above a desk, perfect for a map. I bought a large laminated map of Connecticut from a bookstore downtown, then a box of pushpins from the office supply shop next door, red pins for adoption agencies, blue pins for foster homes, yellow for private placements. I stuck the first pin into Greenwich, the town where my granddaughter was born, the town where she was abandoned. I stood there staring at that single red dot, imagining a constellation of them stretching across the map in months or years, a path I would follow until it ended at her, my granddaughter, my blood, my responsibility, my love, even if I had never touched her. That night, I signed up for an ASL beginners class at the community center. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, they accepted late registrations. When the confirmation email arrived, I stared at it for a long moment. I didn't know where my granddaughter was. I didn't know who was holding her. I didn't know if she was safe. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. When I found her, she would not see a stranger. She would see someone who had learned her language, someone who believed she wasn't broken, someone who came back for her when no one else did. I turned off the lamp, lay down, closed my eyes, and whispered into the darkness, "I will find you, whether it took 1 year or 10. This was the beginning. The first morning in my temporary apartment smelled like stale coffee and old paint. The place had probably been built in the 80s with the kind of beige carpet that never quite looked clean, no matter how often someone vacuumed it. When I woke up, my throat felt raw, as if grief had scraped it from the inside. For a long moment, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my suitcase. I had packed dress shirts, linen pants, and a navy blazer, the clothes of someone who planned to give a keynote speech at a real estate fraud summit in New York. Instead, I was here in a small apartment in Connecticut wearing the same sweater I had cried into the night before. I made instant coffee mostly out of habit and held the mug with both hands. The warmth steadied me. I needed to think. I needed a plan. Wandering around aimlessly would destroy me faster than heartbreak ever could. My phone buzzed with a reminder for the summit. I slid it into silent mode and pushed it away. None of it mattered now. Not the conference, not the emails, not the clients waiting for my reports. Only one thing mattered: finding her. I opened my laptop and typed until pages of search results blurred into each other. Adoption laws, expedited requests, Connecticut foster care transfer logs, deaf community networks. My forensic auditing background sharpened everything. I was trained to look for patterns, inconsistencies, hidden trails. Somewhere in this maze, there had to be a footprint. 3 hours passed before my eyes burned enough that I had to stand. I walked to the window overlooking the parking lot. Cars pulled in and out. People carried grocery bags, laundry baskets, backpacks. Ordinary life moved on. Mine had ruptured overnight. I ran my palm across the cold glass. "Where are you, little one?" Then I remembered something from the night before, the map. I grabbed my purse and drove to a bookstore downtown. The clerk, a man in his 70s with silver eyebrows, helped me find the biggest laminated map of Connecticut they carried. It was taller than my torso when unrolled. He offered to help me carry it to the car. "You planning a road trip?" he asked gently. "Something like that," I said. He nodded as if he could feel the heaviness under my voice. I picked up a box of pushpins at the office supply store next door, red, blue, yellow. Color-coded organization was the only thing keeping my mind from spinning apart. Back at the apartment, I cleared the wall above the desk. I unrolled the map and smoothed it across the surface. It crackled like something waking up after a long sleep. Then I took a red pushpin and pressed it into Greenwich, the place where she was born, the place where she was left. One pin became the beginning of a battle line. I stepped back and studied the map. My heart was still fragile, but something else had begun to form beneath it. Resolve. Not the fiery kind. The quiet, enduring kind that survives after everything else collapses. As I was pinning potential adoption agencies, my phone rang. Evelyn Hart, a firm voice said, "This is Detective Nora Callahan. You emailed me at 4:30 this morning. I don't usually respond before noon, but your message sounded urgent." Her tone was brisk, efficient, no nonsense. The exact opposite of how my insides felt. "Thank you for calling," I said. "I need help finding a newborn placed into the adoption system 5 days ago. I have no legal rights, but I have the entire timeline from the hospital. I also have resources." "Everyone always says they have resources," she said. "What exactly does that mean?" "I'm a forensic property auditor," I replied. "I track financial loopholes and fraudulent real estate transfers for a living. Complex trails are what I do best." There was a pause. Then for the first time, I heard something like interest. "All right," she said. "Can you meet in an hour? Bring the hospital discharge summary if you have it." I hesitated. There was no discharge summary. They never brought her home. Another pause. This one heavier. "I see. Then bring whatever you have." I agreed. After hanging up, I noticed the confirmation email about my ASL class had finally come through. Tuesday and Thursday evenings taught by a retired teacher named Ruth McAllister. The class bio mentioned she had 30 years of experience teaching deaf children in the public school system. I clicked Add to Calendar. It hit me then. If I was going to find my granddaughter, I needed to learn to speak without sound. I needed to be ready the moment she appeared, ready to tell her she was loved in a language she could trust. I took a deep breath and grabbed my coat. Detective Nora Callahan's office was inside a converted house painted dark blue with a brass plaque that read, "Callahan Investigations." The front door creaked when I pushed it open. A bell chimed overhead, the old-fashioned kind. Nora herself was not old-fashioned. She looked mid-40s, hair in a tight bun, navy suit, sleeves rolled up as if she was ready to either interview someone or arrest them. Papers were spread across her desk in precise piles. She motioned for me to sit. "I read your email 3 times, she said. "Most grandparents who contact me are hoping to build a case for custody. Your message was different. You didn't mention custody once." "I'm not thinking about custody yet," I replied. "I just want to find her. I want to know she's alive, that she's safe." Nora's eyes softened, but only slightly. "Tell me everything." I told her about the empty nursery, the blunt cruelty in Melissa's voice, the sealed records, the way Adrian's eyes had avoided mine. When I finished, Nora tapped a pen against her notebook. "This will not be easy," she said. "Special needs placements are fast-tracked. Files are sealed. Agencies operate on confidentiality. You may run into resistance." "I expect resistance," I said. "I don't expect silence." That made her smile faintly. "Good. Because this path is messy. People don't always want to talk, and you will hear things that make you angry. I'm already angry." "Then you're halfway qualified to do this," she said dryly. A surprising laugh escaped me. The first since everything happened. It felt foreign, but necessary. Nora stood and picked up her coat. "Let's begin with the adoption agency closest to the hospital. They might not talk, but we can look for discrepancies. Paper errors, intake timing. Anything unusual." I nodded and followed her out. The agency looked like any suburban office glass doors. Posters of smiling families, a receptionist with a careful smile. But behind the polished exterior was a wall of policy, confidentiality rules, privacy statements, bureaucratic absolutes. "We can't share any identifying information," the receptionist repeated. "We're not asking for that," Nora said calmly. "We just need confirmation whether a newborn matching this timeline passed through your system. I'm sorry, that is still not allowed." Her refusal was polite and final, but I noticed something she didn't hide fast enough. A flicker of recognition. The kind people have when they have seen a case that stuck with them. "Thank you," Nora said, motioning me toward the exit. "We'll be in touch." Once we were outside, I exhaled. She knew the case. "Yes," Nora said, "and she wasn't supposed to show that, which means someone here processed the intake quickly. Possibly too quickly. Is that unusual?" "Very." A small spark lit in my chest. A faint one, but real. When I returned to the apartment that evening, the sky had turned a muted orange. I turned on the single lamp by the desk. Its warm light covered the map like a promise. I picked up a blue pushpin and added it next to the first red one. One step, a tiny one, but forward. I sat down, folded my hands, and whispered the same words I had whispered the night before. I will find you. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I drifted in and out of shallow dreams, the kind where you think you're awake until you realize the ceiling looks wrong. Each time I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was the map on my wall. Connecticut stretched across it like a puzzle I was supposed to solve with bare hands and a stubborn heart. Around 5 in the morning, I gave up pretending to rest. The air in the apartment was cold, the kind that settles into the bones of old buildings. I wrapped myself in a cardigan and sat at the small kitchen table drinking instant coffee that tasted like paper. Today needed to matter. Today I needed more than dead ends and polite refusals. At 8 sharp, my phone buzzed. "Nora." "Morning," she said without preamble. "I've been thinking about that receptionist." "So have I." She recognized something. And people who recognize something usually try too hard to hide it. That's a human flaw we can use. I smiled, tired but grateful. "What's the plan?" "We go back. Not to her, to the person she reports to." I rubbed my temples. "Won't they stonewall us the same way?" "Probably. But stone walls have cracks. Every office does. A supervisor under stress, a staff member who hates their job, someone eager to talk if you ask the right way." She paused. "And Evelyn." Pregnant teenagers, newborn adoptions, medical conditions, they're emotional landslides inside these agencies. Someone always remembers. Something eased in my chest. A small, cautious hope. "I'll meet you there," I said. The second visit felt different. Not because the building had changed, it was still neat, bright, quiet. But this time I walked in with a steadier spine, with purpose instead of panic. We'd barely entered the lobby when Nora murmured, "There, at the end of the hall. She's the one we want." A woman in her mid-50s, gray streaks in her hair glasses hanging on a chain, moving with the weary precision of someone who'd seen every kind of disaster walk through her door. "Ms. Caro," Nora greeted her like an old acquaintance. The woman looked startled. "Do I know you?" "No," Nora said. "But I know your type. You're the one who fixes messes around here." Ms. Caro blinked. "That's accurate." "Good," Nora said. "Because I have a mess." She stepped aside, revealing me. "This is Evelyn Hart." I extended my hand. My son and his wife surrendered their newborn daughter for adoption 5 days after she was born. She's deaf. I want to know if she passed through this office. The woman stiffened. "I'm sorry. I can't confirm or—" "Listen," Nora cut in, lowering her voice. "This isn't an attempt to interfere with placement. There's no custody battle, no rights claim. She just wants to know the child made it safely into the system." I added, "I don't need names. I don't need locations. Just whether she came through here, whether she's alive." Something flickered in Ms. Caro's eyes, a softening, a memory, but she stayed silent. I swallowed. "Please, I'm not here to undo anything. I just need a place to start looking." For a moment, the hallway hummed with nothing but fluorescent light. Then Ms. Caro sighed, slow, heavy, resigned. "You didn't hear this from me," she murmured, eyes lowering. "But 5 days ago, there was an emergency relinquishment of an infant from Greenwich Hospital, a newborn with a flagged hearing concern." My heart began pounding. "We processed it as a closed file transfer," she continued, "meaning the placement was extremely fast, faster than usual. Faster than I liked. Why, I asked. Why would they move so fast, pressure?" She said, "Sometimes families with influence push for quick turnover. They don't want the child lingering in temporary homes. It complicates things." My stomach clenched. Influence. Melissa's wealthy Greenwich family. Of course. Nora asked, "Where was the file transferred?" Ms. Caro hesitated, torn between rules and conscience. "Richmond," she whispered finally. "Richmond, Virginia. A private intermediary center, one that specializes in children with medical classifications." I almost fell. Virginia. Multi-state placement. No wonder nobody in Connecticut had answers. "Thank you," I whispered. She squeezed my arm once. I hope you find what you're looking for. When we stepped back into the sunlight, I filled my lungs deeply like someone who'd been drowning. Richmond, I said. She was sent to Richmond. Nora nodded. It's a start, a real one. I wiped my eyes. After days of nothing. We have our first thread. It's thin, she warned gently, but threads become ropes if pulled correctly. I nodded, and for the first time since walking out of my son's house, the world felt slightly less impossible. I spent the afternoon calling the Richmond Center. Each time the answer was the same, I'm sorry, ma'am. We cannot confirm or deny any information regarding minors. We do not comment on individual cases. Please contact the appropriate legal guardian for details. Each line felt like a punch. At 3 p.m., Nora called again. Any luck? None. Expected. But I have another route, which is someone who owes me a favor. I didn't know what that meant, but I trusted her. One thing about seasoned investigators, they don't explain their magic. They just perform it. Give me until tomorrow morning, she said, and don't lose hope. But hope was a slippery thing, easy to drop, hard to pick up again. At 6 p.m., I went to my first ASL class. The library classroom was brighter than I expected. 12 adults sat in a circle, most around my age, nervous smiles, fidgeting hands, people who looked like they'd fought their own battles. Then the instructor walked in. Ruth McAllister, white hair and a sharp bob, cardigan buttoned perfectly, eyes sharper than steel. She lifted her hands and signed, "Welcome. No voices here. Only hands, only eyes, only heart." The room fell quiet, and for the first time in days, I breathed without pain. Her presence was calm but commanding, kind yet unapologetically firm. Exactly the kind of woman who'd spent decades teaching children the world insisted on misunderstanding. She demonstrated the alphabet slowly. My fingers fumbled. My wrists stiffened. Half the shapes felt impossible, but I kept going. Ruth walked behind us, correcting gently. Her hands touched mine only briefly, shaping a crooked letter H. Her eyes softened. Good. Start again. And I did. Something about the rhythm, the shapes, the silence, the concentration pulled me out of despair. For 90 minutes, I wasn't a grieving grandmother or a failed mother. I was simply a student learning a language built on clarity and intent. When class ended, Ruth signed to me, "Come early next time. You have determination. I can work with that." I nodded gratefully. Outside, the evening air was crisp. Leaves rustled down the sidewalk like small applause. For the first time since the nightmare began, something inside me lifted. Not joy, not relief, but direction, a path. Because today, for the first time, I had more than a broken heart and a map full of guesswork. I had my first real clue. Richmond. She had been in Richmond, and that meant she was still out there, still findable, still mine to fight for. I whispered into the cold air, small, steady, certain I'm coming, sweetheart. However far I have to go, I'm coming. The drive to Richmond the next morning felt heavier than the last, not because of the distance, but because I finally had something resembling a thread to hold. And threads are dangerous things. They can pull you toward a miracle just as easily as toward heartbreak. The private intermediary center sat on a quiet residential street, hidden behind a row of maple trees that had already begun to bud with spring. The building was simple, almost gentle-looking. White siding, green shutters, a ramp built thoughtfully along the side. A place meant to look welcoming, a place that held too many stories behind closed doors. I parked across the street and sat there for a long moment, both hands gripping the steering wheel. "What if she's here?" I whispered. And then quieter, "What if she's not?" Both possibilities terrified me. Eventually, I forced myself out of the car. My legs felt wooden as I crossed the street. When I reached the door, I pressed the bell lightly as if afraid I'd wake someone. A woman opened it. Maybe late 40s, hair pulled back, eyes soft but tired. The kind of tired that comes from years of caring for children who enter the world already at its mercy. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I hope so," I said, my voice smaller than I intended. "I'm looking for information from 12 years ago. A newborn, a girl, hearing impaired at birth, transferred here from Connecticut. Her eyebrows rose with a flicker of recognition. "We've had a few cases like that," she said. "Would you like to see the files we're legally allowed to show?" My knees nearly gave out. "Yes," I whispered, "please." She led me to a small office lined with filing cabinets and children's drawings, stick figures with bright yellow suns and crooked smiles. She pulled a thin folder from a drawer. "This child arrived from Connecticut," she said gently. "Similar timing, similar medical notes." My breath caught. Hands trembling, I opened the folder. The intake form had the same structure, the same glaring blanks. Under mother and father, the same bolded note, "Hearing impaired." My chest tightened. My hands shook harder. This could be her. After 10 years, this could finally be her. She was with us for several months, the woman added, watching my reaction. A quiet child. Very observant, she liked tactile toys. Responded well to touch and light. My throat closed. I imagined a baby, my granddaughter, reaching for light. Reaching for a world she couldn't hear. Where is she now? I choked out. The woman hesitated, and that hesitation cut deeper than any words could. "She was moved," she said quietly, "to a different facility, out of state. The trail becomes unclear after that." I gripped the folder harder. "Unclear," I repeated. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said softly, "the paperwork wasn't handled properly. Some transfers were done by private placement. Some records never made it into the central system." I stared at her, the weight of 10 years pressing down on me. "Is she okay?" "I don't know," she said. The thinness of her voice broke something inside me. She allowed me to sit with the file a little longer, flipping through the sparse notes, feeding patterns, weight records. One scribbled line from a caretaker. "Strong grip. Calms when held." Oh, God. Grace would have calmed when held. I closed the folder slowly. My voice cracked. "Can I see her? Is she here? Is she?" The woman's face softened with a sorrow I recognized instantly. The sorrow of someone who wants to say yes but must say no. "She's not here anymore." And just like that, the brief, fragile light I had clung to collapsed. I nodded, unable to speak. She placed a hand gently on my shoulder. "I'm so sorry." Outside, the sunlight felt cruel. I reached my car, opened the door, but didn't get in. I slid down until I was sitting on the edge of the frame, one hand braced on the pavement. The air trembled around me. "How many children?" I whispered. Voice breaking, how many children live unseen in this world? My tears dropped onto the concrete, leaving dark spots that disappeared almost instantly in the warm air. Not Grace, not her, not yet. Nora arrived 20 minutes later. I hadn't called her. Somehow she knew. She walked up, quietly leaned against the car beside me, and didn't speak for a long moment. She didn't ask questions. She didn't offer false comfort. She simply stood there, sharing the silence like someone who had lived in it before. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, stripped of all her usual sharpness. "I know what that feels like," she said. "To get close, to believe, and then to lose it all over again." I looked at her eyes swollen. "You don't," I whispered. "You couldn't." But then I saw something in her expression, a shadow that had been there since the day we met, a heaviness I had mistaken for professional detachment. She exhaled. "I lost my daughter in a custody ruling," she said quietly. "My ex-husband was connected, powerful. He proved I was unfit because I worked too many hours. She was 3. He moved states. I haven't seen her in 12 years. A tremor shot through me. "She's alive?" Nora continued, voice trembling for the first time. "But she's gone from me, and I still wake up some nights thinking I hear her laugh in the hallway." She swallowed hard. "So believe me, Evelyn, I know exactly what your pain feels like." Something in me cracked open at her words, not from despair this time, but from the rare, raw recognition of a wound mirrored in someone else. I reached for her hand. She let me. 2 mothers, 2 missing girls, 2 lives caught in the spaces systems leave behind. We sat like that for a while, silent, breathing the same heavy air. That evening, I dragged myself to ASL class. I wasn't sure I had the emotional strength, but something in me refused to miss it. That room, that language, it felt like the only thing keeping me anchored to Grace. Ruth noticed my face the moment I walked in. She didn't ask. She didn't need to. After class, when everyone else had left, she approached me with something tucked under her arm. "I was cleaning out my office today," she signed, "and I found this." She placed a small notebook in my hands, soft cover, edges worn, blank inside except for the first page. A beginner's ASL notebook, designed for children. For Grace, she signed softly, touching the cover, or for the child she might have been. My throat closed. It was such a simple gift, yet it carried the weight of an entire childhood Grace had never gotten to experience. I held the notebook to my chest. "Thank you," I signed, my hands trembling. Ruth nodded. "No child is broken," she signed. "What breaks them is the world that refuses to learn their language." Her words pierced me and healed me, just a little. As I walked out of the library that night, the sky was dark, but the notebook felt warm in my hands. It wasn't Grace, not even close, but it was a reminder, a quiet promise that I was learning the language my granddaughter might someday need, and I would keep learning, because somewhere out there, a girl existed. Maybe scared, maybe alone, maybe waiting, and I would not stop, not after 10 years, not after heartbreak, not after false hope. I pressed the notebook to my chest and whispered into the night, "I'll keep going, Grace, at any cost." 4 years passed. 4 years of maps. 4 years of silent classrooms and aching hands repeating the same ASL shapes until muscle memory replaced grief. 4 years of state offices, cold benches, lukewarm coffee, and caseworkers who spoke to me the way people speak to someone who should have let go. But I didn't let go. I couldn't. And then on a windy Thursday afternoon, as I was organizing another stack of files, my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in months. Samir Khan, a young social worker I'd met at a children's shelter in New Jersey. Bright eyes, soft voice, heart, a little too big for the system he worked in. He'd once told me, "If I ever hear anything about a deaf child from Connecticut, you'll be the first person I call." I answered immediately. "Ms. Hart," he said, breathless, as if he'd run to a corner of the building to make this call. I don't know how to say this without getting myself fired. My entire body went still. "Say it anyway." "There's a girl," he whispered. "New arrival 2 weeks ago, deaf. Around the age your granddaughter would be. Staff calls her Grace because she signed something close to the name GRA when asked." My heart slammed against my ribs. "Grace." He lowered his voice even more. "And Ms. Hart, they're treating her badly here." I gripped the edge of my desk. "What do you mean badly?" "There's neglect. Maybe worse. The director is hiding files. Children aren't being documented correctly. Subsidy reports are—" He stopped. "If Grace is your granddaughter, she's not safe here. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't think. I just grabbed my keys." "I'm coming," I said. "How long?" 5 hours, he said. "But please, be careful. This place is complicated." Nora met me in the parking lot before I'd even started the car. She took one look at my face and didn't ask a single question. "What's the address?" she said, sliding into the passenger seat before I could answer. We drove, hours through the dark, highways humming under the tires, rain hitting the windshield in sharp diagonal lines, Nora navigating while I kept my hands clenched tight at 10 and 2. At one point, she glanced at me and murmured, "I can feel it. Something's shifting, Evelyn." I didn't reply. I couldn't, because for the first time in years, something in my chest felt alive. Not hope. Hope was too delicate for this. This was instinct, a sense that the road ahead was narrowing toward a truth I could no longer outrun. We arrived at the temporary shelter just past midnight. It looked more like a forgotten motel than a children's facility, flickering yellow lights, a sagging porch, a padlocked dumpster on the side. A banner hung crookedly, "Safe Futures Transitional Home." The irony stung. Nora knocked. No answer. She knocked again, harder. Finally, a man opened the door. Heavy set, shirt stained with something I didn't want to identify. Eyes darting nervously. "We're closed," he said flatly. Nora flashed her old badge, the one she technically wasn't supposed to use anymore. "Funny," she said dryly, "because you look open." The man swallowed. "We don't give tours." "This isn't a tour," she said. "We're here about a child." Her tone snapped through the air like a wire. He blocked the door with his body. No entry without the director's approval. A thin layer of anger slid under my ribs. Not rage, just clarity. I stepped forward. "I'm not here to fight you," I said calmly. "I'm here to ask about a girl named Grace." His jaw tightened. "No one by that name here." I saw the lie immediately. A small twitch. The way his fingers tightened around the doorframe. Nora stepped closer to him. "You want to say that again?" But I raised my hand. "Let me." I looked him straight in the eyes. "When I walk into a building," I said softly, "I don't just watch faces. I watch patterns. The floor tiles, the boxes, the traffic flow, the inconsistencies." He blinked, confused. "I'm a forensic auditor," I continued. "I've put entire corporations in handcuffs using nothing but missing numbers and suspicious signatures." Nora smirked. "She really has." The man's Adam's apple bobbed. "I know what financial mismanagement looks like," I said. I saw the locked dumpster outside, the gasoline smell, unshredded documents bulging in plastic bags. I leaned in. "If you're hiding subsidy inconsistencies, or worse, child neglect, this entire place will collapse in a week." He froze. Hard. Then he stepped aside. "Just enough." "Make it quick," he muttered. Inside was worse. Stale air, dim lights, a smell of disinfectant that didn't fully conceal something sour underneath. I felt sick. "This is a children's shelter," I whispered. Nora whispered back, "This is why the system collapses, not because of the kids, but because of places like this." Samir appeared from the shadows, exhausted and pale. "She's not here anymore," he said immediately. "I'm sorry." The words hit like an iron door slamming shut. I steadied myself on the wall, where he exhaled shakily. "They transferred her. Suddenly. Paperwork was rushed. I only know one thing." He handed me a small envelope. "She left with this. It was in her file." My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a photograph. A girl, maybe 7, maybe 8, sitting on a worn blanket. Her hair dark, her eyes large, watchful, uncertain. On her wrist, a faint birthmark, almost like a comma. My vision blurred. On the back of the photo was a date and a location. Richmond, VA. Reallocated long-term care facility. Status transferred, again. Always moving, never chosen, never kept. "How long ago was this taken?" I breathed. 4 months, Samir said. "The staff here didn't want anyone asking questions. They've been pushing out high-need kids, quietly makes their numbers look better for funding." Nora cursed under her breath. "So she was here," I whispered. "Almost here. And now she's gone again." A fresh fracture opened inside me, but there was something else beneath it. Direction. A new trail. A new pin for the map. A new place to search. Nora put a steadying hand on my shoulder. "You found another breadcrumb," she said gently. "This is how the trail works, painful inch by painful inch. But this is progress." I held the photo against my chest as if it were a living heartbeat. "Richmond," I murmured. "She's still connected to Richmond." Samir nodded. "If she's the girl you're looking for, she's alive. And she's still moving through the system. But Evelyn, you're getting close." I closed my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I believed him. 4 months. I repeated that number every hour as Nora and Toy lie Sev Richmond. 4 months since the photo. 4 months since someone had placed a quiet, wide-eyed girl with a faint, comma-shaped birthmark into another facility. 4 months meaning she was still close, still within reach, still alive in a world that had done everything to scatter her. The new group home was clean, modern, quiet, almost too quiet. Gray brick walls, a small garden out front, a wind chime that rang softly each time the door opened, a place that really tried to look safe. My hands trembled as I pressed the intercom. "This is Evelyn Hart," I said into the speaker. I'm here about a girl recently transferred, a deaf girl. Her temporary name was Grace." There was a long pause, long enough for my chest to knot. Then the lock clicked open. Inside, a young staff worker approached mid-20s, steady eyes, posture, careful but kind. "You're the woman who called yesterday," she said. "Follow me." My steps felt uneven, like the floor wasn't stable. She led us down a hallway decorated with cheerful posters, bright colors, inspirational quotes, handprints of children. But none of it softened the fact that my heart was beating so hard I could feel it behind my ears. We stopped outside a glass panel door. "She's in here," the woman said quietly. "She keeps to herself, doesn't interact much. She struggles with trust and doesn't fully sign yet. We're trying, but she's had a very unstable record." My breath caught. Unstable record. Another way of saying she's been moved so many times she doesn't know what home is anymore. The staff member opened the door slowly, and there, standing alone in the corner, arms wrapped around her ribs, was a girl, 12 years old. Dark hair falling over her eyes, a faint birthmark on her wrist like a comma pausing on the skin. Her expression sharp, watchful, defensive, like a child who had learned to expect nothing good. The world narrowed until only she existed. My voice barely made it out. "Grace." She didn't look at me, didn't move. Her fingers twitched slightly, but not in any recognizable sign, more like the way a child flinches when unsure if adults mean comfort or harm. Nora squeezed my arm. "You can do this," she whispered. I stepped forward slowly, gently, the way you approach something fragile, not because it will break, but because you will. My hands rose almost on their own. Shapes I had practiced in libraries, community centers, late nights when loneliness was the only witness. Shapes I learned for a child I had never seen. Shapes I prayed would finally matter. I signed high. "I've been looking for you." 3 simple signs, but to me they were a decade of searching. A lifetime of regret. A mother's promise carried across state lines. A grandmother's breath held for 12 years. Grace froze. Her head lifted, slow trembling. Her eyes widened disbelief, wrestling with fear and something deeper underneath, something unbearably young. She stared at my hands, stared at me, stared again at the signs as if replaying them inside her mind. Then in the smallest motion, her own fingers lifted from her chest. Not smooth, not confident, shaky, unfamiliar. But she tried. She tried. She signed back a broken, incomplete version of the same greeting. Her lips parted, her breath hitched, and her eyes, those guarded, watchful eyes, filled with tears so fast they fell before she could wipe them. I felt my knees weaken. For a moment, the air went soundless, still sacred. She took one step toward me, then another. Then she stopped shaking as if she didn't know whether she was allowed to get closer. I opened my arms. Her breath shattered, and she ran the way a child runs only when their soul recognizes something before their mind does, and she crashed into me with a force that knocked the air from my lungs. I held her as if the last 12 years had been nothing more than a storm finally ending. Her shoulders trembled against my chest. Her tears soaked through my sweater. I whispered into her hair, not words, just a sound, a truth, a promise. "You're safe now. You're safe." She clung to me tighter, and for the first time I felt her trust, not fully, not completely, but the fragile beginning of it. But the world has rules, and systems, and paperwork, which meant that before anything permanent could happen, we needed proof, real proof, a DNA test. They swabbed her cheek, first Grace sitting stiffly, unsure, gripping my sleeve. Then they swabbed mine, my hand shaking so badly the nurse steadied my wrist. "We'll have results within 2 hours, the nurse said gently. "You can wait in the family room." 2 hours. I'd already waited 12 years, but those 2 hours were the longest of my life. Nora paced. Grace sat in the corner, knees tucked to her chest, watching me the entire time, as if afraid I might disappear the way everyone else had. I tried to smile at her. She tried to smile back. Both of our attempts broke halfway. When the door finally opened, a doctor stepped inside holding a small white envelope. My heartbeat dropped into my stomach. "For Ms. Hart," he said, handing it to me. My fingers curled around the paper. I couldn't open it. Nora stepped behind me, placing both hands on my shoulders. "You don't have to read it alone," she murmured. But I did. My granddaughter deserved my strength, not my fear. So I inhaled, exhaled, opened the envelope with both hands shaking and saw the number, 99.8%. I didn't even finish reading the rest. My legs buckled. I dropped onto the vinyl chair behind me, both hands trembling so violently the envelope fell to the floor. The room blurred. My breath came in sharp, shallow bursts. Tears filled my vision. 12 years of searching. 12 years of guilt. 12 years of not knowing. And now, here she was, alive, real, mine. Grace looked at my face, confused, frightened, then slowly walked closer, touching my arm lightly. I covered her hand with mine and whispered voice breaking, "Yes, sweetheart, it's you. It's you." She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tears. She leaned into me, and I held her the way I should have held her the day she was born, while my whole body shook with the weight of a miracle that had taken 12 years to arrive. Bringing Grace home should have felt like the end of a long, brutal winter. But anyone who has ever taken in a child with a lifetime of hurt knows finding them is one miracle. Teaching them to feel safe is another. Grace sat in the back seat on the drive to Boston, hugging her backpack to her chest the entire time. No words, no signs, just silent watching. Every few minutes she'd glance at me, as if verifying I still existed, that I wasn't another adult who would hand her off like a package marked fragile. When we finally reached my townhouse in Dorchester, she stepped out slowly, scanning the building, the walkway, the bushes. Hypervigilance. Learned fear. Learned young. "Welcome home," I signed gently. She didn't respond, but her fingers twitched something between a reflex and a beginning. Inside, she hovered by the door until I nudged her backpack off her shoulders. She followed me through the house like a quiet shadow. Her first action in the kitchen was heartbreakingly instinctive. She grabbed a slice of bread and ate it in under 10 seconds, eyes darting like she expected someone to snatch it away. "Sweetheart, you don't need to eat fast here," I signed softly, but her hands stayed rigid, her breath quickened. Fight or flight embedded in her bones. Later, she insisted on keeping the bedroom light on, and slept curled under the covers facing the door as if preparing to run. And every time a door clicked somewhere in the house, a cabinet, a closet, even the fridge, she jumped. Not flinched, jumped. The kind of reaction that comes from years of living on uncertain ground where danger arrives as suddenly as sound. My chest ached watching her. This was my granddaughter, 12 years old, and already she had survived more than most adults ever will. On the third night, after Grace tried to sign 3 sentences at once, so fast my brain short-circuited, I did the thing any desperate grandmother with a smartphone would do. I FaceTimed Samir. He answered immediately. "Ms. Hart," he said, "you look like a woman being held hostage." "I am," I said, "by ASL grammar." He laughed so loudly Grace peeked around the corner. Samir waved to her through the phone. Grace blinked back, unsure if she was allowed to smile. "Okay," Samir said. "Show me the signs." I did. He squinted. "Ms. Hart, that isn't a sentence. That's 3 nouns having an argument." Grace let out a small, very small snort. It was the first sound I had ever heard from her. My heart nearly broke with joy. "Try it slower," he instructed. I did. "Nope," he said. "Still wrong." Grace giggled silently, shoulders shaking. "Samir," I said, exasperated, "you're supposed to help, not humiliate." "I am helping." He pointed at Grace. "She's laughing. That's a win." He was right. And for the rest of the week, he sent short ASL videos, each titled, "For Evelyn Before You Ruin Another Sentence." Grace watched every one, sometimes twice. But healing is never simple. 3 days after Grace moved in, a letter arrived. Thick envelope, expensive paper, typed header, "Walker and Walker Family Council." My stomach dropped. The Walkers. Grace's last set of foster guardians. The same people who had signed her away without a second glance. The same people Samir hinted had been collecting extra financial assistance because of her disability. The letter inside was worse. "We are filing an official claim for financial continuance and foster compensation as the child known as Grace was removed from our household without our full consent." I read it twice, then a third time. Grace stood in the hallway watching me, sensing something was wrong. She signed one hesitant word. Bad, I forced a smile. Not for us. But inside, I felt something dark flicker awake. People think a forensic auditor only chases numbers. They forget numbers tell stories. Numbers reveal what people want to hide. And the walkers had hidden plenty. The psychological thriller begins the next morning. I opened my laptop and began pulling records. Subsidy disbursements, foster stipend logs, state vouchers, unusual timing of transfers, duplicate claims, mileage reimbursements from addresses that didn't exist, rookie mistakes, or greedy ones. By noon, I had built a 14-page report summarizing financial irregularities so blatant any judge would raise an eyebrow. Nora, reading over my shoulder, let out a low whistle. "This is enough to sink them. It's enough to start a fire," I corrected. And it was, because by that evening I faxed my findings to the State Child Welfare Office, the Fraud Investigation Division, and Walker's attorney, with a short, extremely polite note: "If you continue pursuing claims regarding Grace, I will be obligated to disclose all relevant financial irregularities to federal and state authorities." At 9 p.m., Nora poured me tea and said, "That's it, fight over." It wasn't. Because at 9:37 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You should have left things alone, Ms. Hart." A cold ripple moved across my skin. Grace looked up from the couch, sensing the tension. I placed my phone face down and signed, "You're safe. I promise." But deep inside, I knew the walkers were not done, and neither was I, not by a long shot. 12 years is a long time for someone to disappear. Long enough for people to convince themselves their choices were justified. Long enough for guilt to soften into selective memory. Long enough for a man like my son Adrian to believe he could outrun what he'd done. So when my phone lit up with his name, a name I had deleted from my contacts years ago, my hands went cold. Nora was in the kitchen chopping vegetables. Grace sat at the dining table tracing the raised edges of a tactile ASL workbook. She looked up immediately, sensing something in my posture shift. I stepped onto the porch before answering. "Hello?" I said quietly. A long pause. Then Adrian's voice, older, strained, unmistakably desperate. "Mom, I need your help. Not I'm sorry, not I want to see you, not I regret what I did, just I need your help." I closed my eyes for a moment. "What is it, Adrian? His breath shook. "My company collapsed. The investors pulled out. I'm being sued. I don't have anything left." I let the silence hang long enough for him to hear the weight of it, and why I asked softly, "Are you calling me now?" Before he could answer, another voice came on speaker. Melissa, sharp, controlling, calculating the same tone she had used 12 years ago when she told me a deaf baby was a burden the world didn't need. "Well, well," she said with a brittle little laugh. "We always knew you'd come crawling back to protect your legacy. Legacy. As if legacy was a house, a bank account, a reputation, not a child." I didn't respond. Behind me, I felt more than heard the soft creak of the door. Grace stood there, half-hidden fingers gripping the fabric of her sleeve, eyes wide, breath unsteady. She couldn't hear the conversation, but her instincts were sharper than sound. She knew. Her gaze moved from the phone in my hand to my face, reading the tension in my shoulders, the tightening of my jaw. I signed softly, slowly, "It's okay. You're not in danger." But her hands kept trembling, because some children can sense danger in the air long before adults speak it aloud. Adrian exhaled shakily on the phone. "Mom, I know I messed up, but you're the only person who can help me now. I need financial backing, just until I recover. Please." There it was, the real reason. Not regret, not reconciliation, money. I leaned against the porch railing. "Adrian, I said there are conversations you can't buy your way into." Melissa cut in sharply. "Oh, don't start with the moral high ground. You don't even know what we've been through. A bad investment doesn't erase everything he's accomplished." I almost laughed, quietly, without humor. Everything he accomplished. Like abandoning his newborn daughter without even holding her. Like signing termination papers the way someone signs a delivery receipt. Like letting 12 years pass without searching, without asking, without caring. Adrian's voice softened again, fake soft, the kind people use when they want something. "I heard you. You found a kid, a deaf girl. People said you even took her home. My blood chilled. Who told you that? I asked sharply. The walkers, he said. They called us last night, said you're hiding something, that you're trying to take someone from us. Someone. Not Grace, not my daughter, just someone. And Mom, his voice cracked. There's something I need to ask. What is it? That girl. Is she... He hesitated, then pushed out the words. Is she mine? I felt Grace freeze behind me, completely still, not breathing. She couldn't hear the words, but she felt their meaning. I didn't turn around. If I looked at her now, I would break. Yes, I whispered. She is. The silence on the other end was sharp enough to cut. Then Melissa scoffed loudly. Oh, please. We don't know that. You probably just picked up some random kid to feel better about yourself. Adrian, don't let her manipulate you. My jaw tightened. Behind me, Grace's fingers clenched harder into her sleeve until the knuckles went white. Melissa continued, tone icy. That child has nothing to do with us. Nothing. You made the right decision 12 years ago. Adrian stayed quiet. Too quiet. Cowardice sometimes masquerades as silence. I walked back inside, set the phone on the dining table, opened my laptop, and pulled up one document. The DNA report. 99.8%. I turned the screen toward the phone speaker. That little girl, I said, voice steady, is yours, and you lost the right to call her your daughter the day you abandoned her. Grace's breath caught. Her eyes shone with something raw and painful and fiercely alive, a swirl of grief, shock, and something close to recognition. Melissa exploded. You don't get to say that. You don't have the right. I have every right, I said quietly, because I was the only one who looked for her. For 12 years. Through shelters, state lines, foster homes, and filing cabinets, no one cared to open. I learned her language when you wouldn't even learn her name. Nora appeared in the doorway, arms folded, face carved in stone. I closed the laptop with a soft click, a sound that felt heavier than a slammed door. No more calls, I said calmly. No more demands. No more pretending you care. There are legal options, Melissa began. There are, I interrupted. And all of them belong to me now. For the first time, Adrian spoke again, barely above a whisper. Mom, please. But it was too late. I ended the call and placed the phone face down. Grace stepped closer, eyes locked on mine. She lifted trembling fingers. Slowly, she signed, Me yours. My voice broke. Always. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the truth in my face. She took one step closer, and for the first time, she let me wipe a tear from her cheek. People assume the hardest part of finding a child is the search. They're wrong. The hardest part is what comes after the moment, when the truth finally forces everyone into the same room and refuses to let them leave unchanged. I chose a quiet, neutral restaurant in the South End, warm lighting, brick walls, a place where the clatter of dishes couldn't drown out the weight of what needed to be said. Grace sat beside me, shoulders tense, hands moving restlessly under the table. She didn't like new places. She didn't like crowds. She didn't like surprises. And tonight would be all three. Nora arrived next, anchoring the table with her calm, steady presence. She squeezed my wrist under the table. You ready? She whispered. No, I admitted. But it's time. When Adrian and Melissa walked in, even the air seemed to tighten. Melissa entered first, chin-high lips pursed, wearing an outfit that screamed performance, not remorse. Adrian followed her, looking pale, hollow, older than his 30-something years. The moment Grace saw them, she stiffened. Her eyes narrowed, not in fear, but recognition of a threat. I rested my hand over hers. You're safe, I signed, slow, intentional. She nodded once, but her breath stayed quick. No one touched the menus. No one drank their water. Melissa crossed her arms immediately. Well, she said sharply, let's get this over with. I ignored her and pulled out a large manila folder, thick, worn, the edges soft from years of handling. Tonight I began, we will go through everything. All of it. No lies, no money, no manipulation. Adrian swallowed hard. Mom, this is not about you, I said. This is about her. Grace flinched at the attention. She scooted closer to me, shoulders brushing my arm. I unfolded the large map creases running like scars across 12 states. Hundreds of pins, red, blue, yellow, silver, each marking a place I had searched. Melissa snorted. "What is this, scrapbooking? No," I said calmly. "This is 12 years of your neglect." Adrian's face paled. His hands shook on the table. Grace stared at the map, quietly recognizing the shape of her own journey lines, connecting cities she didn't remember, but her body never forgot. Next, I slid forward a single-page form. Melissa went rigid before even reading it. "This," I said, "is the document you signed at the hospital, declining early intervention treatment for a newborn, because, and I am quoting, hearing impairment is unfixable and not worth long-term care." Adrian closed his eyes. Pain sliced through his expression. Melissa exploded. I was exhausted. We were young. We didn't know what we were doing. "Correct," I said, voice razor steady. "You didn't." I turned to Adrian. "But you knew enough to sign the abandonment papers without reading them." His jaw tightened. His chest heaved. Grace watched him through narrowed eyes, trying to understand the man who had set her life into motion without ever meeting her. I placed the envelope in the center of the table. Adrian stared at it like it might ignite. Melissa scoffed loudly. "You and your dramatics!" I slid the page out. 99.8%. I did not read it aloud. I didn't need to. Grace's fingers gripped the table edge. Her breath hitched. She couldn't hear the tension in the room, but she felt it like a vibration under her skin. Slowly she looked from the paper to Adrian. His eyes swam with something raw confusion, guilt, maybe even recognition, but it was years too late. Years too late. Finally, I placed down printed screenshots of Melissa's messages. Threat, blackmail, money, demand, fabricated claims of parental rights, and one message that made Grace flinch so visibly, Nora reached for her arm. "Deaf kids get you bigger checks. You should be grateful we kept her as long as we did." Adrian stared at the message and whispered, "You wrote that." Melissa shrugged. "It's the truth." Someone had to think practically. Grace's hands curled under the table. Her jaw trembled. Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. The silence after the files was suffocating. Then Melissa slammed her hand on the table so hard the glasses rattled. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You dragged us here to guilt-trip him, to act like you're some hero. You think taking in a charity case makes you better than us, Melissa," Adrian said weakly. But she was spiraling. She shoved her chair back violently. It scraped across the floor. She knocked over her glass. She slammed a fist on the table again. Other diners were staring now. Nora slid her hand toward her purse. Not a weapon, just her phone, but the gesture said, "Controlled, ready, steady." Melissa leaned across the table toward me, eyes wild with fury. "You think she's yours now? She's ours. She was always ours. You can't erase—" "Stop!" The word didn't come from me. It didn't come from Adrian. It came from Grace. Not spoken, but signed with such force the air seemed to crack around her. Her hands flew through the signs, sharp, precise, powerful, as if 12 years of silence had been gathering strength for this moment. "Don't touch her. She's the only one who stayed." Every person at the table froze. Even the waiter who had been approaching slowly backed away. Melissa stared at Grace, stunned, speechless. Adrian's eyes flooded instantly. He covered his mouth with one hand, shoulders trembling. Grace stood there, chest rising and falling fast, hands still shaking from the force of her signs. It was the first time she had defended anyone, the first time she had spoken, truly spoken in her own language. I felt my throat close. Nora whispered, "Oh my God." Melissa recovered first, but not in the way she thought. She spat, "How dare?" But Adrian finally broke. Something inside him, the denial, the excuses, the self-preservation collapsed. He sank into his chair, face buried in his hands, whispering, "What have we done?" His shoulders shook. Small, broken sobs escaped. Melissa looked at him with disgust. "You're pathetic." Then she spun on her heel and stormed out of the restaurant, knocking a chair sideways as she went. No one stopped her, not even Adrian. When the door closed behind her, the table fell into a silence so deep it felt sacred. Adrian lifted his head. Tears streaked down his face. He looked at Grace not with ownership, not with entitlement, but with the devastating clarity of a man facing the truth too late. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Grace stared at him, not cruelly, not kindly, just truthfully, seeing him for exactly who he was. She didn't sign anything back. Some wounds don't answer. Some truths don't need translation. The dinner ended not with shouting, not with reconciliation, but with the quiet, heavy stillness that follows irrevocable truth, a truth no one could run from anymore. 1 year later, the house felt different. Not quieter, not louder, just fuller. Fuller with motion, fuller with warmth, fuller with a life I had once only allowed myself to imagine on lonely nights, a life where Grace wasn't a name on a missing file or a pin on a map or a blurred photograph from a shelter, but a girl, a child, a daughter in every way that mattered. She was 12 when I found her, 13 now, and the shift was subtle but unmistakable. She carried herself not like someone preparing to run, but like someone who finally believed she could stay. Her first year at the Boston School for the Deaf had reshaped her. The first month, she clung to me at drop-off. The second month, she walked in on her own. By spring, she had 3 close friends, kids, who communicated with their hands and their faces as effortlessly as breathing. Her teachers told me she was catching up academically, thriving socially, absorbing ASL like she was born to speak with her hands. "She signs with hunger," one teacher said. "Like every word she learns is a door unlocking." I knew exactly why. For years, she had lived in silence, surrounded by voices she could not access, and adults who believed her quietness was a burden. Now she was surrounded by a world built for her, a world that understood her, a world where she wasn't broken, she was fluent. Samir visited every week, bringing new ASL jokes he'd learned online, most of which he delivered with the dramatic flair of a man auditioning for a sitcom. Grace adored him. Ruth came over every Thursday with baked goods and new signing exercises, treating Grace like a granddaughter she'd borrowed from the universe. Nora, steady, blunt, fiercely protective. Nora became the quiet hinge of our household. She helped with homework. She monitored nightmares. She learned how to say, "I'm proud of you," with her hands. One evening, Grace labeled us all on a sheet of paper: Evelyn, home; Nora, strong; Ruth, teacher; Samir, funny me, safe. When she showed me, I turned away for a moment so she wouldn't see my tears. This wasn't the family I had started with, but it was the one that had stayed, the family we chose, the family that chose us back. On the anniversary of the day I found her, I pulled out the map. Not the digital version, the original. The one with creases like old wounds. The one with coffee stains from motel lobbies. The one covered in colored pins, red for adoption agencies, blue for state offices, yellow for shelters, silver for specialists, black for dead ends. Grace walked into the room and froze when she saw it. She had never seen the physical map before. Her fingers moved slowly. "All this." For me, I nodded. Yes. She stepped closer, staring at every pin like they were ghosts of a life she almost never escaped. Then I did something I'd wanted to do for years. One by one, I began removing the pins. Each time a pin came out, I replaced it with a small printed photo, Grace smiling at the kitchen table, Grace holding up her first ASL certificate, Grace standing with Samir outside the school, Grace hugging Nora with her whole face lit up, Grace sitting beside Ruth at a library desk, Grace eating ice cream on the back porch, Grace sleeping peacefully with the lights finally off. A map of a lost child became a map of a found one. Grace moved beside me, helping place each photo with careful, gentle hands. When the last pin came out, when the last photo replaced a dead end, she stepped back, and tears filled her eyes. Grace turned to me. Her hands rose slow, deliberate trembling, not from fear this time, but emotion. She signed, "Why didn't you give up?" The question hit me like a breath I'd been holding for years. I cupped her hands gently so she would feel my steadiness, then signed back, "Because you're mine, and love doesn't expire." Her lower lip quivered. Then she surged forward and wrapped her arms around me, a fierce, full-bodied hug that felt like the completion of a circle 12 years wide. In that moment, everything I had lost, everything she had endured, everything the world had tried to take from us, quietly dissolved. There was no anger left, no bitterness, no fear, just love, and the family we chose. We stood there for a long time, together, whole, a grandmother and a granddaughter who had walked through 12 years of separate storms and finally found the same shore.